passing arguments to SOAP web services with DataWeave. Now, what if we need to input something to our web service? We need to form a XML structure or envelope to send out through the SOAP service. Well, in this case, that's what we're going to look at. We'll see how to map an input argument into DataWeave when it needs one. That'll be our walkthrough 7.5, where we pass an argument to a SOAP web service. We'll change the web service operation so that it requires a destination as the input argument. We'll set that flow variable to the desired destination, and we'll use DataWeave to pass the flow variable into the web service. Behind the scenes, it will be constructing a SOAP envelope for us to send the request outbound. Let's get started. Now we'll return to our Get Delta Flights flow, and we will select our web service consumer. From the operation box, let's switch from List All Flights to Find Flight. Click inside of our canvas and save the application up. Now we have a different operation in place, one that requires an inbound parameter to be passed to it. Let's see if we can set this up. To do this, we are going to add a flow ref at the beginning of our flow. And this flow ref, as you probably could imagine, is going to capture that code because we're going to use that in our DataWeave transform. So let's select Set Code Subflow inside of here. And now, just like all of our other flows, we should be grabbing that variable. Next up, we're going to bring another transform message into the flow right before DataWeave. This way, we have a way to transform and create that SOAP envelope before passing it onward. So let's take a moment to rename our web service consumer. We'll call this Delta SOAP request. Okay, and then we've got a transform message after and a transform message before. All right, now double clicking on that transform message before the SOAP service, you'll see the flow variable is detected. And you'll also see on the right here, it now knows what the output should be because it knows what the SOAP service takes in based on the WSDL. So let's simply map the code to the destination here to create that structure we need to satisfy the request. Okay, so we're going to go through and attempt to send this request through. Let's save the application up. We'll run this in normal mode if it's not already. All right, now we'll go into our Postman and let's try sending the same request through. So question mark, and we'll put in a destination this time, and let's say that this destination is SFO. Or rather than destination, code, of course. That's what we had specified in the variable, and hit send. And now you should get this ugly exception back. And this is an exception that DataWeave was unable to do the transform effectively. You'll notice that it's saying it couldn't transform list all flights response. Well, our response is no longer list all flights because now we're doing a completely different operation. So clearly we need to make some type of modification to our transform. Let's go back to AnyPoint Studio and see if we can figure this out. If we go back over to transform message, generally this still is going to be a good structure assuming the XML hasn't changed drastically, but our namespace is clearly not appropriate, or not necessarily our namespace, but more so what's inside of this first element that has our namespace in it. So rather than list all flights, we actually want to grab the find flight response inside of here. In fact, right when you change this to find flight response, you should see all of these guys remap, and you could even detect it from the find flight response up here originally. We can see that that's now mapping in successfully, and maybe our application will map successfully now too. So let's go ahead and save this all up. In debug mode, I'm going to have you run this app in debug, because I'd like to show you the actual construction of the SOAP envelope to get a little bit of a perspective on that. All right, now if we go back to Postman, let's make this request again, flip back to AnyPoint Studio and start stepping through. So we'll step over our variable transformer, over our initial transform to the SOAP request, All right. And now I want to show you the actual construction that little flow variable is creating via DataWeave. We'll do the expression evaluator and ask for the payload as java.lang.string and view it here, in which case you can see just mapping that SFO parameter or a query parameter is not just doing that, but also generating that full SOAP envelope that's needed to make the request here. So that's good. We'll move along, and our transform message should fire off. We'll send that all the way through, and back in our browser, boom, we've now got a legitimate JSON response for the Delta flights as we would like, and we are also allowing for the specification of a code. So we can go in and do LAX. Again, since I'm in debug mode, I'll step that all the way through. And there's the LAX flights just like that. Now, what if we make a small modification here? What if we asked for a destination that didn't actually exist? Well, I'm going to try foo here and hit send. Again, going back to Anypoint Studio and pushing that all the way through. Now with foo, and again, continuing to push the exception through as well, with foo, you'll notice we do get an exception and it comes back to our client. Foo is not valid and Mule is throwing an exception, which is actually going to lead us into our next module, and that is going to be around exception handling. So for now, note that this exception is occurring, this error is kind of blowing up and giving our client a bad response, but soon enough we'll delve into error handling inside of Mule and how we can handle this type of exception if it were to occur. For now, let's go back to Anypoint Studio and be sure to stop the project from running.